Don't look now, but Harry Potter might not be the only wizard named Harry that is gracing our television screens in the near future. With the recent news that there could be a new adaptation for the Dresden Files, I thought it'd be fun to workshop what that could look like, and it got way bigger than I expected.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge. I'm Zach, former radio host and lifelong sports fan, discovering the magic of urban fantasy. Spoiler warning before we get into all this stuff for all things Dresden through Battleground. And please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Now, I'm going to caveat this with the obvious disclaimer. I don't know if any of this is ever going to officially happen. We've not gotten word that it is official yet. However, there have been some recent news breaking, I guess, of a possible new Dresden Files TV adaptation. I believe I saw it first on Daniel Green's YouTube channel and then dug it up in the vast array of the Googles. But the way that they talk about it is that the plan would be a focused show on a specific plot line from three of the Dresden books in particular, following the war with the Red Court and obviously Harry's then girlfriend, Susan Rodriguez, getting infected and how all of that part of the story played out. And what I wanted to know is how you take that concept and potentially turn it into a bigger multi-season show that actually covers the entirety of the Dresden Files book story. And I think that with the foundation that they are working from, it seems that the way to do that is to follow that same formula of taking these multi-book plot lines and turning them into their own seasons. Now, it's not like every book in the series just sticks to one specific part of the story. So you can't just show each book in the series as its own episode or make it follow beat by beat of what's happening in the books on TV, because things will get wonky. You're going to need to pull like pieces from multiple books that aren't included in that to fill in some of the gaps. And there's going to be characters and story elements within the book canon that the TV show hasn't covered or introduced yet, and it could get confusing. And that's the biggest struggle that I had in trying to put together what this could possibly look like, particularly making it linear from season to season, because to follow the books to the letter, you're going to have characters and elements involved in some of the, like, take the end of that first show that they're talking about doing, the war against the Red Court. How do you have like Thomas and Molly in that battle from Changes if you haven't introduced the White Court of Vampires or gone through anything with the Fae yet? And I can understand also that could be very confusing for like trying to cram too much into a TV series. So that's going to be a little bit of a hurdle for them to get through if they were to follow a format like this, and especially with a character like Molly, how she has like a full progression throughout the entire series, where she goes from being a kid talking to Harry to his apprentice to Winter Lady. And if you are doing multi-book plot lines, you have to kind of jump back and forth in the actual timeline. So how do you explain her being a kid and then the Winter Lady and then going back again to be an apprentice in a later thing from another season? So that does seem kind of confusing. Then I had this idea of how that could potentially work, right? So the Dresden Files are written from a first-person narrative and positioned as if it's Harry telling the story as he remembers it. So what you could potentially do is allow for the seasons to be those chunks of the story that have overlaps with them and use the voiceover to help clean some of it up. Like, maybe you get maybe you get Molly coming in and you're like, "Oh yeah, this was happening while Molly was my apprentice. Can't wait to tell you how that all started." And it's him addressing the audience, particularly those that like the book readers will recognize as, "Oh yeah," but also the TV audience can kind of keep up with some of the, you know, changes from season to season if there are any character inconsistencies in that way. With Harry's sense of humor, you might even be able to pull it off like Deadpool, where it's actually the character himself breaking the fourth wall. He is very sarcastic, and that kind of would fit. Um, but if you're weaving him doing that kind of thing throughout the story and like telling the story, maybe that's a way to clean some of that up. And I think some of it is you can keep them as self-contained as possible to avoid some of the confusion with the multi faceted elements, because that's one of the most difficult things I think to adapt from Dresden, is that there's just so much nuance and so many different elements and factions going on that if you just try to cram it all together on TV, you're not going to be able to give the context that is necessary for people to truly understand it. Like, think about the vampires themselves. There's literally three different types of vampires in this story. There are three different types of werewolves in this story. There are the Fae, and a whole bunch of other. There's what you call them that I can't even think of right. It doesn't matter. You get my point. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Ghouls. That's the word I was looking for. And so if you're trying to follow say like the Red Court story, then you might have to leave out a few things so that you can cohesively follow that story in that season. So I guess I'm putting the cart before the horse. With that in mind, I decided that that would be a really fun exercise, and to kind of map out what this show could be if it was more than just the Red Court. And I came up with 6 seasons that you could have for this. And for this exercise, we're going to go through what those 6 seasons would entail, assuming that there are 10 episodes per season. And so that this is not 2 hours long, I'm going to do them a season at a time. But I wanted to give you that setup and let you know that's what we're doing here. And I hope that sounds like fun to you, because I was having fun with it, putting it together and thinking it through. So obviously, I think what we have to do is assume that season 1 is the show that they're already talking about making. So season 1 is going to be the war against the Red Court. And this is truly built on the relationship between Harry and Susan Rodriguez, because while all of the supernatural elements of the books are entertaining, and while it is just an absolutely chaotic ride that Dresden is going on throughout all 17 books so far, because at the time of recording this, 12 months hasn't come out yet, at its core, and I think why people truly connect to this series, is because of the relationships that are built and the character journeys that we take. Not just the development that Dresden has, but the development of the characters around him and how he interacts with them, how he tends to lean on them, and things that they're going through. And it's because people can connect to those relationships without this turning into like a massive, this isn't a romantasy book, right? Like, there's not a whole lot of romantic drama in this, but it's still at its core a relationship series. Harry's relationship to all of these very important people that play these very important roles as he's going through this absolute just train wreck of chaos that he's always getting himself into. And so I think for a TV viewing audience in particular, that's what they're going to connect to most, are those relationships with those other people. Think about something even as silly as The Office. Jim and Pam was kind of the backbone of that story. That relationship is one of the core components that kept people coming back and interested in wanting to see what was happening next, amidst the chaos of just the laughter of and absurdity that The Office was. And Now, this is not going to be a mockumentary, I don't think. um, I think something similar applies here, and I think that's what you tie this first season to, is really the Harry Susan relationship, because that's truly at the core of this entire war with the Red Court. So, the 3 books that this really pulls together are Grave Peril, Death Masks, and Changes. And so my assumption is that's the 3 books that have also been what Butcher has alluded to in those short snippets and quotes that we've seen those articles pull. So I think that you can do that with pretty much sticking to stuff that was happening in those 3 books without having to stray too far out of that, but I think there's going to be a little bit, and I'll explain what I mean about that here in a minute. So, with that, I think for episode 1, you pull from Grave Peril, you've got Harry and Michael doing their kind of like opening mission. That's the action that's happening throughout the episode, that ghost mission where they have to go to like the hospital, and there's that the ghost of what's her face that's about to like kill a bunch of babies, which is an insane way to start a brand new TV series, right? But I mean, that's what was going on. And so I think you have them doing that for your action and keeping people, visually engaged. But all throughout that, as they are in the books, Michael is kind of grilling Harry a little bit on his feelings for Susan, because by that point, we're on book 3 in the book series, and it's actually been set up and we know that they're seeing each other. So I think you can I think you can have them having those conversations and maybe even weave it into like in the action, Michael is like probing him and Harry's trying to like fight this ghost and is like, is this really the best time for this? I think that could make for a really fun way to kind of introduce the characters, the snarkiness, their buddy cop almost in that, while laying the groundwork that like, oh hey, there's like there's a romantic interest involved here, even though we don't even see her on the screen yet. And you end that first episode basically once they've taken down Agatha something or other, I believe was her name, and come back out of the Never Never and get arrested. And I think that's your first episode. So then episode 2 is a little bit more of a, I don't want to call it a chill episode, but it's chill in present day, because in this episode, Michael and Harry are in jail. They are sharing a holding cell, and this gives Michael plenty of opportunity to continue, pushing Harry about his feelings that he's struggling to admit about Susan. And I think that where you can get some like action into this episode is through flashbacks to the adventures that Harry and Susan have already had at this point in the book series in Stormfront and Full Moon. I think you can incorporate like the love potion gone wrong when that demon attacked Harry and Susan in his apartment, and you can show kind of that whole scene that took place in the book. Maybe leave out like, maybe you connect it to the at that point I think they were calling him the Shadow Man, Victor Sells. Like maybe you tie it to him, maybe you just kind of like leave that little detail out and just make it a demon was attacking them and this is how they got through it, and there was that funny part of Susan taking a love potion instead of the getaway potion and all of the hilarity that ensued. And you can also, you know, come back to reality. They're talking a little bit more in the jail cell, and then there's another flashback to Full Moon where she's like coming to pick him up, and they're dealing with a werewolf problem, and he jumps out of the car, and all of that, all of that craziness that took place in Full Moon that Susan was actually a part of. And I think that's where you can actually build up the realism and the expectation that like, okay, these two have actually been through some things. This isn't just some like brand new first episode, like, why do I care about these two people and their relationship and like their problems, you can see history and pull in some cool parts from Stormfront and Full Moon without having to really adapt those whole stories into the TV show. You just kind of pull out some of the cool chunks that Susan was a part of and maybe tweak them around the edges so that they become a little bit more standalone and you don't need all the context of like those book long plot points. So that's episode 2. And I think that you end it with them getting bailed out, maybe give us Charity being Charity to Dresden, and then Susan makes her like grand entrance as the person who came and bailed him out of jail. So then episode 3, I think this is where you've got the party at Bianca's, and Susan ultimately being kidnapped. You know, you can start it with her getting him back from jail. The invitation comes. I don't think you need to do a whole lot in between the two. You can probably just jump straight to, all right, like, no, you're maybe you just take out the part where she snuck to the party and maybe they just go together, and have Michael with them, or you find a way to have him insist like, no, you're not coming, it's not safe, blah 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 blah, and then cut to we're at the party, him and Michael doing, things, and voila, there she is, she snuck in anyways. And then you can pick it up from there. You can decide whether or not to include Thomas in this. If you're the showrunners and you don't want to introduce the White Court yet, then I think you can still have the majority of what took place at the party without laying that initial Thomas introduction seed yet. Like, yes, Justine got kidnapped too, but that's not completely imperative to being able to wrap up that part of the plot, if you don't want to add in that additional layer of like the multiple different types of vampires and all of that, and oh my gosh, this is actually Harry's half brother but he has no idea, and who the heck is this guy, can we trust him, like, if you don't want to add those additional layers into the episode, you don't absolutely have to have them for a compelling retelling of the events that took place, at that party and Susan ultimately getting kidnapped by Bianca in the Red Court of Vampires. Same thing with like his godmother, the Lenanchi. Yes, she played a big role in the book, but it wasn't a big role that was like imperative to the ending of the book. I think you can find another way for them to like find their way out of the party through the smoke than her clearing the path. And you don't really need her stealing Susan's memories, because at this point in time, we're what, 3 episodes into a TV series? Like, we haven't seen her have those memories just yet, the way we would have in the books. So I think you can still play it out if you want to, while taking out a few of the additional layers to that story, and make it a little bit clearer for the TV viewing audience without losing the crux of the story. So then you have episode 4 where Harry is saving Susan from Bianca's mansion and ultimately burns everything down, starts the war with the Red Court, gets Susan out of there, kills Bianca. And you can have that pretty much play out just like it does, even if you don't have Thomas and Justine as a part of that. Like, it could still be, it could just be Harry and Michael, and the Skull Bob, and you can still get to the same, you can still get there in the same compelling way and have pretty much all of the same other stuff happening too, the way that it did in the books. And this obviously truly kicks off the war between the White Council and the Red Court of Vampires. And we are 4 episodes into our new TV show, and everybody is hooked, not just to the relationship that has been built between Harry and Susan, but also Like, okay, cool. We thought maybe he solved the problem. He was able to save the girl, but oh, she's been half turned and he just started a war. Well, shit. So you've got this like middle of the season. What the heck do we do now? Right. So then we jump ahead in the book canon to the book Death Masks. And this book is actually, it's split between the Red Court plotline and the Denarians plotline. And so I think you obviously, for this season of the show, you just stick to the Red Court portions of the Death Masks book, right? You start it with Ortega challenging Harry to a duel, and you introduce Susan in her capacity as like a half turned Red Court vampire, but and and show the difficulties that is and like the implications of what that means. If she gives in, if she actually feeds and takes a life, she's going to be a vampire. That's pretty heavy. And I think you can get a full, episode out of showing that. You can have them have, a fight with some red court vampires because they're in a war now, similar to the one in the book where, you know, um, they're waiting outside of Harry's apartment and she, kicks two of their asses, and you see the tattoos um, start to show for her. You can absolutely play into that with this episode, explain kind of what's been going on for her in that way, and then also weave in the challenge that he gets from Duke Ortega. In the next episode, which would be what, episode 6, right? One, two, three, four, five, six. Yep, episode 6. You can have them go on a mission together. Maybe you make this another Red Court attack as opposed to the Denarians conflict over the Shroud, so that you don't have to also explain what the heck a Denarian is, or just make it some monsters that look like Denarians, and use or make it Denarians, but use the voiceover I was talking about earlier with Dresden, where he's like, oh my gosh, yeah. Wait till I tell you more about these things. But what you need to know right now is like they're almost impossible to kill, and they're driven by the fallen angels. Not good. And then show them fighting and stuff like that. Like you could do it that way, or again, you could just tweak them to be some other supernatural entity, whether it's a red court attack or just some monsters, to show how strong Susan is, and really develop that part of the plot. But then you have that episode is a little bit more build, I guess, and like action, and just getting us some more information with before you go into the next episode with the actual duel between Harry and Duke Ortega, um, and you can show how Ortega cheated, how uh, like he got away in the craziness. Susan got hurt, and so now she's kind of has to go away or whatever. And then you can have it end with like Ebenezer McCoy calling up Dresden and saying like, watch the news, and Duke Ortega, and it's like, oh, what's the fallout going to be of this? And then you have to have a time jump. Yeah, and I think you explain that time jump with that like, oh my, what are the implications going to be here? Susan nearly died. She's got to go away. She's not safe around people or for Harry. Not to mention, you've at some point in time had their, you know, sexual encounter that ultimately leads to Maggie that Harry doesn't know about, because you need that for the final 3 episodes of the season. And so I think you can play with that time jump a little bit, where it's like, okay, Susan had to go. She got hurt badly. She's not safe here. It's not safe, for her to be around Harry because of what just happened. And we've shown you that in the past couple of episodes. And then, oh my gosh, Ebenezer just dropped a whole satellite on or the Ortega, manor. And that's how you can say, like, over the past 8 year, and maybe you use the voiceover again where it's like, and that changed everything, and you can say, over the past 8 years, we've been in this war, and have him kind of like, give some context or whatever, but do that after the shock of, like, or incorporating the shock of Susan calling him after being away for several years and telling him he has a daughter and that she's been kidnapped. And that's like the big, what the heck is going on here for episode 7. And he goes into action, and this is where he confronts the council. He confronts Ortega's wife, who is responsible for this, and it kind of blows up in his face. He doesn't get any of the support he needs, and things are not going well, and he's spiraling. Episode 8, you've got him tracking down Maggie. You've got him working with Susan. They're reunited, and there's tension about the secrets that she kept. She's also able to catch him up on, like, what she's been doing, what it's been like for her. She still hasn't turned, all of that stuff. And you're really building towards this, like, we have to get our daughter, and then we're going to figure out our shit. And then you have the final episode after they have found where Maggie's being kept, what the plan is by the Red Court. They're going to kill her on this altar and wipe out our whole, line of existence. Oh my gosh. And then we head into the season finale, which is the actual battle that went down. And obviously, Dresden has to kill Susan after she has turned, and he does it on that same altar and wipes out the entire Red Court. Huge dramatic scene, huge chaotic battle, huge heavy emotional weight. And then it's an end with Maggie being safe and him getting that advice from Ebenezer McCoy of, like, keeping her safe. And they kind of allude to she needs to be hidden or whatever. I think that's a really compelling season of TV with the Dresden Files, like, without messing up the book timeline. It certainly wouldn't do what the previous adaptation did and just make up its whole thing and nothing makes any sense. That's a whole other video that I'm going to have to do. But I think that's season 1, and I think that's good enough to get you season 2, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next video, along with the following all 5 of the additional seasons that I came up with in this format of the adaptation, because I think this has been super fun, and I think it could be really cool for TV. And I hope that you have enjoyed this. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment if you think that this TV show will actually happen, and will they be able to pull off a telling of the war against the Red Court in a way that leaves the door open for additional seasons. Like, what would you be most excited to see in this portion of the adaptation? If you're listening on a podcast player app, go ahead and please leave a 5-star review. And remember, life is short. Drive that trusty Blue Beetle, curl up in your basement apartment with a good book, fuego the whole damn building if anybody has a problem with it. Just make sure that Bob makes it out And those Svartalfs, those clever Svartalfs, are able to keep enough power going so you can catch the next episode of Belated Binge.